However, let's talk about this. At the time when Brett Kavanaugh was having these hearings, we all knew the FBI did not have the time that it needed to investigate the actual claims. During the course of the questioning of Brett Kavanaugh, and I should say his sort of like yelling every response as if the volume and the anger he projects and the indignation that he projects is actually a substitute for the truth. During those hearings, he was questioned not just about what happened with Dr. Blasey Ford, but there were questions as to what happened in Yale. A woman who was a student at the time, her name was Deborah Ramirez, claimed that at one point Brett Kavanaugh had basically thrust his penis into her face at a party. At the time, Kavanaugh said, "Oh, if that had happened, it would have been all over the Yale campus." Well, the New York Times, I don't have the exact quote right in front of me, but the New York Times started off this piece by saying that's what Brett Kavanaugh said. And we did some reporting and we found that, in fact, it was all over the Yale campus, that many people knew about it. This is something obviously the FBI could have found out with a little bit more time. That was part of the reason why you didn't give him more time. Then in this same piece, a book written by Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly, two New York Times reporters, as far as I know. Citing two officials, reporters said that the former Yale classmate Max Stier told senators and the FBI about a different episode of alleged sexual misconduct, which also involved Brett Kavanaugh whipping out his penis and thrusting on another woman who was not interested. Now, those two, that second, or this new revelation, the supposed alleged victim and others refused to comment on it. But what is bizarre about this story is not that this came out. I mean, look, the idea that Deborah Ramirez or Blasey Ford would go and put themselves in harm's way for no reason at all to lie about these things. The idea that Max Stier, who went to the Senate, he went to the FBI and to the senators to give them the information that he had. And this is a guy who is a Stanford law grad, a former Supreme Court clerk. He runs a bipartisan Center for Public Service. This is also not a guy who's like, you know what, I'm going to just take a leap on this and pretend like I saw him do this. I mean, it would have been a much different debate had Brett Kavanaugh come out and said, look, I did some horrible things when I was in college and I would drink too much. And I have reflected on this and I think it's going to make me a better judge because I realize how horrible those things were. But that's not the grounds that they want to fight this on. They want to fight this on the grounds that it is irresponsible to hold this man to account for what he did. It is just not the way things are. That if someone who's gone through this type of, has this kind of pedigree and received all the proper finishings on that pedigree, that he would have to deal with this. It just wasn't the deal. The deal was at the time, you get to do this shit and it doesn't hurt you. It may hurt the women, it may hurt the victims, whatever. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. They can recover. They'll bounce back. But the deal was, as far as he understood, and then he shows up here and it's like, wait, you're changing the deal on me. This is an outrage. And so we have now, I think, about a half a dozen presidential candidates are calling for Kavanaugh to be impeached. I mean, because he lied. He lied over and over during that hearing. We all knew it. I can't even remember what it was now. The thing that he wrote in the yearbook as if it was some type of homage.
Renata alumnus?
Yes. It was an homage. Homage to her. We didn't tell her about it at the time. We said it as something that we thought, was a way of saying, like, she's great. We love her. She's terrific. And then like, oh yeah, we also hesitated to let her know that we had actually written that. Here's that moment.
Ask you about Renata Dolphin, who lives in Connecticut. She thought these yearbook statements were, quote, horrible, hurtful, and simply untrue, end quote, because Renata alumni clearly implied some boast of sexual conquest. And that's the reason that you apologized to her, correct?
That's false, speaking about the yearbook. And she said she and I never had any sexual interaction. So your question is false, and I've addressed that in the opening statement. And so your question is based on a false premise and really does great harm to her. I don't know why you're bringing this up, frankly. Doing great harm to her by even bringing her name up here is really unfortunate.
Well, calling someone an alumnus in that way,
well, implying what you're implying about
by a number of your football friends at the time as boasting of sexual conquest. That's the reason that I'm bringing it up.
And yeah, no, it's false. You're implying that. Look what you're bringing up right now about her. Look what you're doing.
Chairman, I ask that these interruptions not be subtracted from my time.
I mean, this indignation. Look, every single person in that room knew he was lying. His wife, his kids, every single person in that room knew he was lying, and it didn't make a difference. Guy's going to sit on the highest court in the land for the rest of his life, for the rest of some of our lives. And he was lying through his teeth. And if you don't think the ability to admit that you did something wrong when it was so blatantly obvious, if you don't think that having at least the decency to say, I am holding one of the most important positions in our society, and I am going to show that you need to acknowledge the truth and make an argument as to why you have in some way changed or understand it differently. I mean, this stuff is like stuff that you want your 27-year-old boy to be able to deal with. Never mind that they're going to sit on the court. Like, you want that, like, you need to be an adult enough to say, I messed up. I feel bad for it. This is what I've done to mitigate it. That's what you expect out of your children as a parent. The idea that that's not immediately satisfactory or immediately to be expected and required of a Supreme Court justice. And I'm not saying that you get that and then you get a pass to go on the court. I'm just saying that's like, you have that responsibility if you're in a position where you're speaking publicly in that context. That's your minimum. That's the minimum they should require of you to walk through the door of that court, of that Senate hearing. And then we have sort of like this ongoing participation in this farce where the New York Times, in some way, I mean, they just don't know how to deal with this. It's an excerpt from a book that their own reporters wrote, so they put it in the op-ed section. Now, that's fine, but there's new revelations and new reporting in there, and there should have been a reported piece as well on the front page. And then when they put it out to promote it on Twitter, this is what they put. New York Times opinion: having a penis thrust in your face at a drunken dorm party may seem like harmless fun. But when Brett Kavanaugh did it to her, Deborah Ramirez says it confirmed that she didn't belong at Yale in the first place. Like, really? Really? Does it seem like harmless fun to like whom? Like honestly, having a penis thrust in your face at a drunken dorm party may seem like harmless fun. I would want to sort of like get a sense of like, from whose perspective is that? From maybe the drunken penis guy, it might seem like harmless fun, but I have a feeling that just about everybody on the other end of that drunken penis would not feel like it's harmless fun. And but that's what your expectation, be harmless fun. But something very specific about this woman that made her feel somehow like she didn't belong there. No,
Very
the way
subjective.
this should be constructed is when Brett Kavanaugh realized Deborah Ramirez might have a sense that she didn't belong at Yale, she became the perfect target for it to be fun for him when he's drunk to wave his penis in her face in front of his friends. We found the most vulnerable person in this general area, and then we just did to her what we could do. That's the way that this should be constructed. They had to take this tweet down because, of course. Meanwhile, some right winger, who is she now? Bethany Mandel?
Her and Seth Mandel, they're just right wingers. I'll get the outlet here.
Yeah, she wrote, I lived with guys, all guys, my senior year of college. So in other words, she chose to room with guys during her senior year in college. Perfectly valid choice. I went to a co-ed dorm school. Nice. I've opted in to live with guys. Invariably, we're going to be exposed to stuff. That's fine.
She's Ricochet Media, by the way.
And this happened to me literally every day. Now, I doubt it did in the same context, but she clearly felt comfortable in that area. Maybe the idea of consent is too hard for her. Go back, please. One of my roommates walked around naked every day. And then she puts in parens, not Avi Smolin. That's at Avi Smolin. But also, hi, remember this? Laughter, 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 laughter. And then Avi Smolin, I guess, didn't think it was so funny. He replied to her, if I recall correctly, our roommate walked around in his underwear, and I think you asked him to cover up.
And I think
if you asked him to cover up, he would have. If you did ask and he didn't, then I'm sorry I didn't act to help fix it then. I do believe Deborah Ramirez and Christine Blasey Ford, and that we should trust women when they come forward. In other words, Avi Smolin is saying, like, I didn't like you then. I don't like you now. I think there's a real difference between having friends that you agree to live with who walk around in their underwear than having some drunken guy slap his penis in your face at a party and laugh about it. She's obviously not capable of seeing that difference. And I would say good for her, or at least fortunate for her, that she's never been victimized in such a way. It's not a question of like, I'm so strong that I can handle being around guys who I'm friends with wearing underwear. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we now have two guys who sit on the Supreme Court who have incredibly credible, like shockingly credible accounts of sexual harassment levied against them. It's pretty stunning. It's pretty stunning.
It is and it isn't.
Exactly. It's I guess a stunning reminder of what is in this country.
Yeah, the rules really haven't changed that much, actually.
It's, I probably should have started with the Dave Rubin stuff.
Ask the moms.
Ask the moms. I think we should ask the moms. I think there should be. I would love to see a poll of moms. When you send your daughter to college, pro or against the idea of having some drunk guy slap a penis in her face?
Separate but related.
How funny would that be? I know, for fun for some people.
Yeah, put it on the intake form, on the orientation form. I separate but related. I'd like to know about the gambling debts as well.
Yes,
but that's for another day.
Yeah. Right.
But hopefully someday.
Well, I'm sure.
I'd like
it's
to
gonna come
ask
out in
whoever
25
about
years,
that.
Somebody's.
Ask the Sackler family.
Ooh, want to go to another Nationals game?
Folks,